Welcome, viewers. Good to see you guys again. This is your wonderful, gracious host, Dr. Heartbreak, and you have tuned in to the Heartbreak HeartbreakHEELTurn. Appreciate y'all listening. We're live right now on a couple websites. And you're probably wondering why I got Mr. Perfect's music in the background. Well, one, Mr. Perfect's music is awesome. One of the best in-ring themes of all time. Second, playing Mr. Perfect's theme is kind of a sign, kind of a foreshadowing, a sign to come, really. As far as where I'm headed with this podcast. So, stay tuned, and me playing this theme will make sense very, very soon. Perfect. Oh, just perfect. We have a lot to talk about, as we always do. It was a pretty decent week in wrestling, and I think that this week, really sets up things for the future for a lot of for Battleground, obviously in 2 weeks. TNA's on the come up. UFC 200 that happened. I'm not gonna talk about that in depth really, but I think if anything, this week really helped set up a lot of storylines and a lot of things that are, like I said, going to be for the upcoming week. So, if we want to really get into it, I guess I'm gonna start out with my favorite part of the week. I guess is really Seth Rollins with his. Well, let's talk about Monday Night Raw. Monday Night Raw was live from Detroit at the Izod Center, I believe, on the 11th of July. It's currently right now. It's the 17th of July, the 15th of July. I'm sorry, and that's when I'm recording this. And Detroit was also the place where Shane McMahon had first made his comeback, and they gave him his ravishing ovation. And he said on numerous occasions on podcasts and things of that nature that ovation in Detroit was one of the main reasons why he decided to stick around with the company after WrestleMania, because that really touched his heart, and it really showed that the fans really did appreciate what he did for them over the years, and it really reminded him why he fell in love with the business in the first place. So that's the setting that we're at right now. If we want to get into talking about the big story, is really obviously the belt, the big belt everyone's fighting for, the WWE World Heavyweight Championship belt. And we had a segment. Obviously, Roman Reigns is still suspended, so he's not going to be. He wasn't showing up on this Raw or any Raw anytime soon. But we're starting to get towards crunch time. We have the draft next week, next Tuesday, so which means we only have one more Raw. And it also means that the Smackdown this week was the last Smackdown on Thursday. So we only have one more Raw, and we only have, until that's the only show left until the draft. And then right after the draft is the Battleground pay-per-view. So, it's really interesting to me. It's tough. This pay-per-view, this Battleground pay-per-view is really going to be one of a kind, because it's going to be something that is right after a draft, immediately after splitting the brands, and you have just such unique circumstances going into this pay-per-view, unlike any other in the history of the company. You got a guy who was the main guy in Roman Reigns, who was suspended. So therefore, he's not in any of the promos before this pay-per-view, but yet he's still in the main event. You have this Shield triple threat that people have been waiting for ever since the Shield broke up. Matter of fact, ever since the Shield came together and debuted, people have been waiting for them to have a triple threat match between those three guys, which, if you do search on YouTube, not to be a spoiler or anything, but if you search on YouTube, you will find a triple threat between those three guys back when they were in their FCW days back in developmental. And it was I'm not gonna tell you who won, but it was a pretty good match, and I can imagine now with all the years under their belt and how much better performers all three of them are. I can imagine this match will be even better. Hopefully, it's not as gimmicky. Hopefully, it can just be, pure wrestling and those three guys just going at it with the great storyline that they have. And honestly, with the storyline like this, I think WWE, is on the cusp. And I might be going out on a limb saying this, but they're on the cusp of another like 5-star quality feud or slash match. And I always believe that when it comes to 5-star matches in the WWE, the matches always are unbelievable, but for them to be 5 stars, not only do the matches have to deliver, but the storyline behind the matches also have to be A1. Like, they have to be top notch. And it didn't really dawn on me until, I started watching some episodes of Raw for my Heartbreak Time Machine segment, which I'll get into later in the show. But I was watching one of the 4 rated 5-star matches in WWE history, and one of them was Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 13 back in 1997. And just watching the Raws leading up to WrestleMania 13, I haven't even watched the WrestleMania 13 match yet, but the Raws leading up to it and just the storyline behind it, and how those two, how Bret and Stone Cold are just so perfect. Like, everything seemed so real, and the storyline, like, you felt so invested into it going into the pay-per-view. And this is the reason why I wanted to do this segment, the Heartbreak Time Machine segment, because I did want people to feel like, I figure not a lot of listeners did have the time to, whether it was go back and watch these old Raws or didn't get a chance to live in the moment of the time. Because at the time, 1997, I don't want to date myself, but I am doing this. I was only about 5 years old when that match happened. So, I didn't really get a chance to see it per se and see all those Raws when they came out week by week by week. So by watching the Raws week by week and then trying to watch Nitro as well as ECW into those weeks, I can kind of put myself in a time machine and put myself back in time and kind of see things for how they were at the time. Now, I do know the overall, like, the outcome, so I can never, like, be like, I don't know what's going to happen at the end, because I do know the outcome of most of the things that I watch. Not a lot of the things for Nitro, and I did that on purpose because I don't know much about Nitro. So there's still some surprises when I watch that show. But as far as the WWE, obviously, I know my history, so, the outcomes aren't really that big of a deal to me because I already know what's going to happen. But as far as getting myself invested into the storyline and seeing how things progressed over time, that is what was important to me, and that's why I went back to watch those things. And I can see the storyline with the Shield triple threat match, and how they're setting these things up, and I can see they're on the cusp of a 5-star program. And the match, I feel like, will deliver, hopefully. Hopefully Roman doesn't lose a step as he's suspended. Dean Ambrose is great. We all know Dean and Seth. Those two put on a great match, just them alone. And adding Roman, I feel like, will add to the match instead of taking away from it. So I feel like they could have a great match, and I feel like the storyline is very close to being on the cusp of great. And I feel like the draft will probably be the final piece to the storyline, or however they decide to do it with these 3 guys. And then going into the match itself, for me, the best way for the match to end up in 5 stars is for a double turn to happen. And it's funny because, you have a champion going in. The champion isn't really the guy that you see as the back burner guy. But in this case, that is the case. Seth Rollins is not, Dean Ambrose is not the main focus here. He is the champion, but he isn't the guy, It's Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins who are the 2 guys that are really the more polarizing dudes in the match. And Dean is just the champion. And not to say that he's like a paper champion, but ever since he won the belt at Money in the Bank, And in my opinion, the fact that he won it so quickly was because he was a transitional champion. Now, transitioning to another face or transitioning to a heel, I don't know yet. But if Heartbreak was Vince McMahon, so if I was Vince McHeartbreak, right, and I had to make my own story out of this, the way I would have it plan out is I would have Roman turn heel, and not heel the way that everyone is saying for him to turn heel. I more see him turning heel where it's blatant, but at the same time, it isn't traditional, you know. And it was almost like, I had watched a story about I had watched a podcast between uh, Scott Hall and Razor Ramon. I mean, sheesh. Scott Hall and Stone Cold Steve Austin was on Stone Cold's podcast, and he was talking about how he was the bad guy, Scott Hall, and in the WWE when he came in, and they wanted to turn him into a good guy, but they didn't want it to be so conventional and have him go against the conventional bad guy, and just the same old same old. What they did was they used the kid, and they used the concept of the jobber, the 1 2 3 kid who pinned him, and it was one of the biggest surprises in Monday Night Raw history. And in my opinion, that's what they're gonna try to do with with Roman as far as turning him heel. They're gonna try to do it in an unconventional way. And for me, I hear these stories about how they're gonna have the Roman Reigns redemption story. And um, even though he got suspended for taking steroids, and he's coming back and still being in the main event, I see it as he's gonna win the title. He's going to win it, and they're going to boo the living daylights out of him. And basically, his heel turn has already happened. He just needs to cement it with one, gesture or comment or anything. One little thing that, bang, and you'll have the heel turn everybody's been waiting for. And I think that this whole redemption thing, the whole redemption story that they're going to have, I think it's all satire. It's all sarcasm, and it's serious. But it's there to fool the fans. It's to fool us into thinking that they're going to keep it the same way, and to not, obviously, like, it's a way for them to stay ahead of us. Because I think they have to turn him heel. They have no choice, but they don't want to make it so blatant and have everybody know this. So they have this little redemption thing that they're going to come out with to make it seem like they're still trying to make him a good guy, even when he comes back after wellness policy infraction that he had. So it's just, honestly, to me, in my opinion, it's just there to make him look, like he's gonna come back as a babyface. But in reality, they're gonna turn him heel, and I think they'll probably do a double turn. That's how I would do it. They would have Roman go heel and have Seth go face. And watching the steps that they did back in '97, how they had Stone Cold and Bret in the submission match, and how that was 5 stars, and most of the reason why was because at the end, they slowly had the story where they had it where Stone Cold was the bad guy and Bret was the big hero for all these years. But by the time the match ended, those roles were reversed, and Stone Cold was the good guy, and Bret ended up being the heel and the bad guy in the end. And I feel like they can do that here because slowly but surely you see Seth Rollins having, babyface tendencies, doing the little Rollins report thing he did, which was not heelish at all. It was hilarious and it was funny, and the crowd loved it. I'm sure everybody watching it loved it. It was hilarious to me. So, like little things like that, and I just feel like I feel like it's what's best right now. I feel like going into SummerSlam, they would love that story, having Seth be the good guy and Roman being the bad guy, and having Roman, they want Roman to be the champion. And honestly, I honestly believe that Roman is a good champion. I just don't think that he's a good babyface champion. I don't think that he's good, the kids and the charities and stuff, yeah, but as far as like the fans and having the fans behind him, that's not the case. And it's sad because he was so close. I don't know what it was in between his win on Raw after TLC and the Royal Rumble that had the fans turn against him again. But he had the fans won over after he won on Raw that night. After he punched out Vince and he beat Sheamus for the belt. And I think it was just because maybe they hated Sheamus so much they just they wanted to see anybody but Sheamus with it. And Sheamus was the only guy more unpopular than Roman, which means he did his job. And he got Roman over. He was the only guy who could. But yet Roman still found a way to mess it up. And I think it's because of the inconsistency with his character. You know, the inconsistencies that he has all the time, from being the best Samoan to smiling and making jokes about tater tots and things like that. Like, that's corny. Like, all that shit is corny, bro. Like, it's corny. We all know it's corny. And if that was your character from the beginning, okay, that's your character. But for you to be this Samoan badass, that's how you came in as a Shield, and then you just turned into this cookie cutter punk. No, you can't switch it up like that and expect us to. We have to call bullshit on it. You can't expect us to just sit there and just take it all in. And that's the reason why I think they turned on him by the Royal Rumble. Because, to be honest with you, I went back and I watched the Royal Rumble and their package for it and the whole setup, and it was amazing. You know, if Roman was an over champion, honestly, the Royal Rumble would have been one of the better Royal Rumbles, one of the better pay-per-views I've seen in a long time, because the setup for it was beautiful. You know, they had the way they had the whole thing look, and the way they set it up about how Roman needs to defend his title the first time ever a champion goes in #1, and it was a great setup, in my opinion. But because Roman wasn't over, now imagine you take Stone Cold Steve Austin, right, at the height of his popularity. You take Shawn Michaels, mid-1996. You take John Cena, 2004, 2005, and you take them and put them in the spot Roman was in that Royal Rumble. That Royal Rumble is legendary, hands down legendary, because you have guys that are over to the point where that story is must see, and it's just polarizing. And it was polarizing enough to get people to watch the Royal Rumble because, you know, it was a cool story to tell. But as far as wrestling to break beyond the threshold of just being a part of pop culture, like, you know, wrestling, like, yeah, they do great numbers now, right? They do great numbers. They sell a lot of T-shirts. They have a lot of eyes on the product now. That's true, but that's because of social media and things like that. And everything has a social media following. Now, mind you, WWE has a very good one. You know, they've really put a lot of effort into building their social media audience, which has obviously helped the product a lot. But that doesn't mean you're a part of pop culture still, and you're not. You know, you got John Cena hosting, and the thing is, we're on the cusp. You know, they're on the cusp. They're very close to doing it, and I feel like a lot of the steps that they're taking right now are very good steps. They just need to, you know, lock it in and make sure that all systems are go. You know, you got John Cena hosting the ESPYs, which is the first time ever a WWE guy is even, you know, that was even thought of. There's only been 3 athletes ever that have hosted the ESPYs, and John Cena is one of them now. I'm talking about ever athletes, and these are athletes. It's a show is for athletes, you know. It's an award show for athletes. So, you know, that's a big deal. You got WWE in memes now on social media. You have, you know, it's becoming more and more part of pop culture. But for it to be as big as it was back in the Attitude Era, it needs to be polarizing, and it needs to have stars. And that's what it's lacking. It has John Cena, but John Cena isn't the champion, nor will he be the champion anytime soon. Which means what? That means that your champion needs to be polarizing, and the guy that's chasing the champion needs to be polarizing. You know? So without those 2 things, if you don't have the 2 biggest guys in the company duking it out back and forth, then your product will never be as big as you want it to be. And they're so close. You know, Roman Reigns is polarizing, but in my opinion, he's just in the wrong role. If you take Roman Reigns and you turn him heel, he will be the biggest heel we have had in the company since maybe I don't even know. I couldn't even tell you. Like a big heel that was polarizing, maybe 97 Shawn Michaels. And he was groundbreaking and changed the game 100%. Like there are a lot of heels that were like, like you had the 2008 Jerichos. He was a great heel. You had, um, uh, I guess you could put CM Punk in that category. Um, But as far as like heels that drew and that just everybody wanted to see them, like whether them lose or just to see them, period, because they were polarizing. You got people like the Honky Tonk Man back in the day with the IC title. People sold out Madison Square Garden because they wanted to see him lose. That's how much they hated him. Or Shawn Michaels in '97. That's why I bring him up, because he was polarizing regardless if he was a face or a heel, which is why, in my opinion, he's the greatest of all time. You know, things like that. You haven't had a huge monster heel in a long time. And as far as monster faces go, all you've had is John Cena and Batista. I'm not gonna say Batista wasn't a big face. He was, but John Cena's been there longer with the longevity and stuff like that. When they had John Cena and Batista going, it was great. And but the thing is, they didn't have a bad guy tailing them 24/7. You know, like in the Attitude Era. The Attitude Era, you can name the guys that was chasing Stone Cold. You had Dude Love first, then you had Kane, then you had Ministry, Undertaker. Like I'm not gonna go in order, but you get what I'm saying, Like those guys you remembered though. You remembered, the bad guys that were chasing Stone Cold for his belt, and some of the ones that won, like The Rock and Mankind and all that stuff. But nowadays you don't remember those long arcing storylines don't exist. And that's what we need. For you to have long arcing storylines, though, you need guys that get over as far as the biggest heels and the biggest faces. And, I feel like the roster has people that have that potential. You got AJ Styles, you got Roman Reigns. Cena's still there, obviously. Nobody wants to see him with the belt. But for anybody to have a program with him automatically puts faces on that program. You got guys like Seth Rollins who's on the cusp, Dean Ambrose who's on the cusp, and then a bunch of up and comers who can be good mid carders and good, middle heels and middle faces. They're very close, and with the rosters getting split in half, like I said, they're on the verge. And if they do all these things properly in the next coming weeks, especially giving Roman the belt at Battleground, I feel like would be the best move because it would be the best thing to see in SummerSlam. I think everyone would want to see it. If Roman had the championship going into SummerSlam as the champion, everyone that's a wrestling fan would want to watch SummerSlam because they would want to see what the heck they're going to do with Roman. Whether he's already heel or face, or they do the turn at Battleground, or they wait till SummerSlam to do it, you need to give him the belt because I'm not going to be as interested in SummerSlam if you have Dean Ambrose going in as champion. And Seth Rollins as well. Because people want Seth to win. Therefore, Seth is the babyface. And if you give it to have Roman to be the guy chasing the champion, which is what they'll inevitably do if Roman doesn't have the belt going into SummerSlam, then it's just going to be a boo fest because nobody wants to see Roman win it. Nobody ever wants to see the heel chasing a popular champion. While that's what transitional champions are for. They're there to give the title to the monster heel for the babyface to chase them. So therefore, Roman needs to have the belt. Point blank, period. I don't care what anybody says. That's what has to happen. And how can you deny Seth Rollins being a great babyface after he gives us a great promo like this?
Roman, first of all, I want to thank you for sitting down with me and agreeing to do this interview.
I've waited for this for a long time.
As have I. So look, I don't want to waste any time. I'm just going to get right down to it. Are you disappointed that the WWE Universe finally knows the truth about you? That you're a liar, a cheater, and a complete disgrace?
Not at all. Not at all. I didn't get in this business to camouflage. I'm not the guy who wants to hide. I want everybody to see me. I want to be center stage. I want to represent this company to the fullest. I want to represent my bloodline. I'm not here for second place.
unbelievable. I mean, I really thought you would be embarrassed or show some measure of regret, but you actually seem to be proud of what you did.
Yeah, I did it. I went all in, and it is what it is.
Wow. So brazen. But after an admission like that, do you really think that you should still be in the triple threat match at Battleground?
No.
Wow. Well, I agree. But do you intend to keep being a horrible person and a terrible role model?
As long as I have breath in my lungs and I wake up in the morning, I can do it.
You really are a monster, aren't you? Now that you've ruined your career, I really only have one question left for you. How do you feel about your brother, Dean Ambrose, as WWE champion?
To be honest, when I hear that statement, the majority of me wants to just puke. Like,
finally, something we can agree on. Roman, thank you for your time and for this very illuminating interview.
that's really good. Thanks.
Come on, hear that crowd. They're cheering the hell out of him. They know they love that segment. Now you can't tell me that Seth Rollins isn't slowly playing the babyface role. Like, come on now. Don't try to deny it, guys. All right, so now we transition to other parts of Raw, other parts of wrestling this week. I know at the end of Raw, the main event was really a promo. As the boss came back, Vince McMahon, he had a lot of things to say, and he wanted to let the fans know about the new GM of Raw and SmackDown. Well, the new commissioners of Raw and SmackDown. And between the two choices of his two offspring, Shane McMahon and Stephanie McMahon, eventually he gave Shane McMahon the duties of taking over SmackDown and Stephanie the duties of taking over Raw. But he told them that they're the commissioners and that they need to hire individual general managers themselves of their companies, of their two separate brands, by next week, or else he would do it for them. So people are wondering who's Shane McMahon gonna hire for SmackDown Live, and as well as Stephanie. Well, Heartbreak, as I always do, have the scoop for you. Word on the street is, and on the internet, and word on my sources all say that, you know, it's looking like Daniel Bryan is going to be Daniel Bryan, I know, right? Daniel Bryan is going to be the general manager for SmackDown. And there hasn't really been any reports on Raw yet as far as who Stephanie McMahon is going to pick. But it's kind of obvious. You know, she does have a husband named Triple H, and he hasn't been on TV in a long time, so it does make sense for him to just, you know, come out of the woodworks and all of a sudden be the general manager again and authority and blah, 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 blah. That seems like that's what they're going to do. And I wouldn't put it past him at all. The whole Daniel Bryan thing I don't understand because he's not really much of a talker. He could cut a good promo, but he was more known for his in-ring stuff. You know, he wasn't much of a talker, and I understand he was retired, and the WWE Universe loves Daniel Bryan, but in a general manager role, I don't know. I guess that's to be continued. In other news, we have just some great stuff on this Raw. You know, this Raw had a lot of great things going for it. You know, they had the New Day have their little battle with the Wyatts, aka the Final Deletion Part 2. You know, they basically copied everything TNA did with Brother Nero and all that stuff. And I'm going to get to that in a little bit, but that's what they basically did. And it was great to see. So I don't have any problem with it. It was good to see WWE come out of their shell a little bit. And it's almost like, you know, the Monday Night Wars all over again, at least for one night. You know, they realized TNA is doing something groundbreaking. And just like WWE did in Attitude Era, they copied it. They copied everything WCW did. So they decided to copy this thing. And it worked out pretty well. It was a little bit weird in my opinion. I think, but it also puts a lot of eyes on this storyline, and a lot of people are going to be very intrigued by what happens at Battleground. Xavier Woods, the way he's acting all weird, and the fact that he's not shaving his beard right now. If you guys haven't seen recent pictures of him or on his YouTube channel, Up Up Down Down, he hasn't shaved his beard in quite a while. And we all know the Wyatts have. I mean, one of the one of the criteria to be a Wyatt family member is to have a big beard. So, you know, that's probably where that's going. Unfortunately, it'd be crazy to see the New Day split up, but maybe it's just like a little quick split up just to get the fans to, you know, go crazy for a little bit, and then obviously bring it right back at SummerSlam, which would be great to see because then they would have the fans in the palm of their hands as always. So, you know, I'm looking forward to that program. Probably the biggest thing that happened on this show, as far as, you know, surprises go, are, in my opinion, the Intercontinental Championship is going to be defended at Battleground, and The Miz is putting up his title against none other than the superstar known as Darren Young. Darren Young, they had a probably like 30-man battle royal over the top rope, and it got down to Darren Young, who got flattened by a deep six from Baron Corbin. And from there, he was stuck in the corner and didn't move. And there was Apollo Crews and Baron Corbin left. And they eliminated each other by accident, thus leaving only Darren Young in the ring. And he gets up and looks around like, yo, I'm the last one. I won. What? I won. So I guess all those promos with Bob Backlund, that he made, let's make Darren Young great again, all that stuff paid off. And well, at least it paid off right now. You know, we'll see how he performs in this Intercontinental match against The Miz. I don't think The Miz is going to lose the belt, but I do think that Darren Young is going to really cement himself as a singles competitor. Because when you watch their tag matches, as far as especially recently, the last couple ones that they've had, I'm talking about the primetime players. Darren Young, when he did come in, he's a very good worker. He worked with Kalisto when they had their little battles with the Lucha Dragons. Like, he could work for a guy as big as him. He's a very, very good in-ring technician. So I see this match to be great, and I hope he wrestles circles around The Miz so that even by the end of the match, when The Miz does eventually end up winning by shenanigans, probably, Darren Young, people are going to be like, wow, that Darren Young guy, you know, he really did prove us wrong, and he's a competitor here. So I'm looking forward to that. I really hope that's what happens because he's a great worker, and it would be a shame to see him go back into obscurity like he was before when he broke up with Titus the first time. So, I mean, I see him as a better wrestler than Titus. So Titus has gotten his push way long, and I think it's past overdue that Darren Young gets his. So it's great to see that. And Bob Backlund, as we all know, we all love Bob Backlund. He can never do any wrong. So it's great to see him back, and same old Bob screaming just like back in 1995 against Bret Hart. Same old Bob Backlund, which is good to see again. So I have no problems with that. I did mention earlier about you know, the Seth Rollins with his Rollins report, that little thing that I played, and now Dean Ambrose coming out and confronted him about that whole thing. And Dean Ambrose had some interesting things to say. I think I should play it for you guys and let you guys hear what he had to say to Seth Rollins about what he thinks about the state of the company.
I'm the backbone of this industry. I'm the king of this company. It's been that way for a long time now, and now the whole world knows it.
Now, king of the company, I don't know about that. I'm not sure that makes much sense. Dean, it's his promo. He was probably shooting from the heart, so he was just saying whatever he felt in his heart. And that's probably what he felt. But in reality, in real life, Dean Ambrose is not the king of anything. If anything, he's probably the king of transitional programs. He just so happens to have the belt at this point. And I'm not hating on the guy. I really like Dean Ambrose. I just, like I said, I don't really see him as a main event dude. And I don't really see him drawing as big as Seth Rollins would as champion, or as we all know Roman Reigns would as champion. So I guess, I'm not going to fall into the category of, well, the guy that draws the most has to be the champion, because if that was the case, we would put John Cena to be the champion forever. But that's not the point. The point is to not beat a dead horse with the stick over and over again. John Cena, we know he can draw, but at the same time, he can draw without the championship. So why not get a guy that has the championship and make him into a draw like Cena? And to do that, you need to give him the belt. Now, Cena's been on top for, like they always say, a decade or whatever. That's 10 years. That's 10 years he's been fighting back and forth for the belt. It didn't just happen overnight. So, in my opinion, Cena doesn't need the belt to be champion. Roman does. Roman needs to be he doesn't need to have the belt to be a draw, but at the same time, him having the belt is better than him not having the belt as far as their live event numbers and all that good stuff. I'm actually going to the Smackdown live show on Tuesday because it's in Worcester and I live really close to there. So I'm actually going to that show. And I'm excited for it, but I'm also a little bit disappointed because Roman is still suspended when that show airs, so he's not going to be at the show. I'm only bought tickets to the show because I figured it's the first draft. It's going to be history making. 1, 2, I can interview a lot of people while I'm there for the podcast and all that good stuff. And 3, there's probably going to be a lot of surprise people coming out that people weren't expecting, whether it's a Goldberg or a Kurt Angle or an Eric Bischoff, whatever it is, there's going to be some surprise people showing up, and I want to be there for that. So especially if it's so close to me, why not? But I am disappointed that Roman Reigns isn't going to be there. So, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. And I'm not the biggest Roman Reigns guy. Like, I'm not the biggest supporter like a Kevin Castle or something like that. Like, that's not who I am. But at the same time, I do understand that he's a draw. So, you got to go with what works, and he works, in my opinion. They just need to stop playing around and make him the bad guy that he's supposed to be. Because honestly, his look screams bad guy, and like it happened with all the greats. Every single great guy that was a big baby face was a bad guy first to start with, and they weren't a bad guy in a faction that helped them get big. They were a bad guy by themselves at one point to get them over. I don't want to hear, oh yeah, Roman was a bad guy with the Shield. No, he was with the Shield when he was a bad guy. Therefore, all the heat wasn't on him only. It was on him and Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins and the Shield. And the Shield turned face before they broke up. Therefore, since Roman Reigns has been a singles competitor, he's been a good guy the entire time. And hopefully this whole delay that they're doing with his heel turn is just a very good, slow cooking setup to make it that when he does turn heel, it's going to be a huge deal. It's going to be a big deal, big deal. And I hope that's what they're. It's not. I hope they don't demean it and make it trash, because we've waited so long for it, and they better do it right. I'm not going to sit here and act like I know the perfect way to do it. But hopefully they figure out the perfect way to do it, because if they mess this up, they could put themselves back years because of this one little thing. And it might sound like I'm exaggerating, but I'm not, because they've put so much effort already into Roman Reigns that if they don't if he doesn't fulfill his his destiny of being a top guy, it's a big blow to the company. It's a big blow to him. It's a big blow to the company, and they're gonna have to start all over basically from the beginning and find out what's really who's gonna be the guy if it's not gonna be Roman. You know. I mean, you look at guys. I mean, there's thousands of examples of guys I can give you, but if you want to give, if you want me to give you examples of top guys, because I'm seeing some people in the chat talking about, well, who was a heel that was a heel and then turned babyface that got over really big, and you know, I hope that's just a question for me to just say the answer because you should know the answer. I mean, think of Stone Cold Steve Austin, huge bad guy, turned face, and then was big. John Cena, Doctor of Thugonomics, that was a heel character, and from there, you know, he turned face. Now he's big. The Rock, you know, he started out as a baby face, but then he turned heel, went to the Nation. Now, yeah, the Nation is a faction. Yeah, just like the Shield. No. Stop it. Because he separated from the Nation, then turned heel, won the belt at Survivor Series 98, and stayed heel for up until like 1999, mid 1999, or so, you know, after Backlash 1999, he stayed heel, and he was by himself at that point. He was with Vince and Shane, but you know, he was the champion, so he wasn't that you know, he wasn't deflecting any of his heat on anybody else. It was all on him. So, I mean, you know, Vince had a big big part in that as well. I'm not gonna sit here and act like Vince wasn't the biggest heel at the time, but you know what I'm saying. Vince couldn't be the champion, so Rocky was the champion. Therefore, Rocky was vicariously Vince's, you know, heel magnet. You know, so if that makes sense. So those are just three names, you know, random names that I could just throw out there for that. I mean, they're huge names, but you know, to each his own, I guess. So hopefully you guys, understand where this is going, and hopefully the company understands that that's the only really way they can do anything with Roman Reigns. So hopefully that's what they do. If not, it'll be a disappointment. Now, I don't know how many of y'all actually heard the reference that I heard, but I'm an avid NBA, you know, basketball guy. I play basketball, and I don't think many of you guys, you know, got the reference. But just in case you missed it, for all my basketball fans out there, I'm gonna play this, and I'm not even gonna say what it is. I'm just gonna let my basketball fans, you know, realize that WWE is a lot more, let's say, pop culture than people would imagine they would be.
Facing Enzo and Cass, how are you feeling heading into this match tonight?
Renee, those boys are in trouble, if you want my unfiltered opinion.
Another rookie mistake by these two, right?
Yeah.
Thinking that John Cena cares about anybody other than John Cena? I mean, come on. I mean, is he here? I haven't seen him. No. Have you seen him, Renee? Is he here? Have you seen him? No, I haven't seen him. You know where he is? He's in LA at rehearsal. He's hosting the ESPYs on Wednesday. He's at rehearsal.
Wait. Like practice? Practice?
Yeah, like practice.
We talking about practice?
Practice.
We talking about practice, man?
We talking. I'm telling you.
Listen. You know what? I actually.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. Sheer brilliance from the club, AJ Styles. Man, I'm telling you that these guys can be unbelievable on this main roster, and I think they're gonna have of all the people that can have a great opportunity when this brand split happens. I think those guys will benefit the most because those guys definitely deserve belts at some point, and having them all condensed into one might not be the best thing, especially for AJ being a world champion. That's the only belt he can go for. unless he pulls the sarcastic, Shawn Michaels European Championship run or something like that. Other than that, he should be going for the world title because he's that big of a figure. And then, Anderson and Gallows, the tag titles, whether or not they split the tag titles into two separate brands, I don't think it should matter. I think that those guys should get those belts eventually because just being paired with AJ, those three guys together with their chemistry, they have it. Like, look at that. Like, that's such a. If you guys don't know what that is, hopefully in the comments you'll read it. I see a couple people talking about it in the comments. You guys can read and see what that's actually from. What that reference that they were talking about. So I don't want to leave you guys in the I don't know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, let's move on. I do want to talk shortly about the things that did happen on SmackDown. Probably the biggest thing to me, they had they set up a battleground. If people were wondering what was going to go on with the women's title, they set up a tag team match between Dana Brooke, Charlotte versus Sasha Banks and a person of her choosing. But, they're pumping it like, Sasha doesn't have any friends. Therefore, she's not going to find anybody to tag with at the pay-per-view. Listen, Sasha Banks, if you need someone to tag with, hit me up. My email, heartbreak@post.com. I'll tag with you. I don't care. Shoot. I bet you I'm better than half the. No, let me stop. Those divas are kicking ass right now, so I don't want to say anything. They're not getting enough time, though. It's great to see the divas when they're out there, but it's tough because there isn't a divas undercard belt and there isn't like a tag belt. So the other divas, unless they have like great storylines, which none of them do because there aren't very many good storylines to begin with, men or women in the company, it's going to be tough to see them on TV. So if they're not a part of the world championship chase as far as women go, they're not going to be on TV. So it's kind of tough to see that. But hopefully, again, the brand split helps figure some of those things out. I hope they have this whole thing figured out because I'm telling you, I have a lot of questions going into this brand split thing. And I don't want to keep bringing it up, but it's like, dang, like there are a lot of questions that aren't answered that I can't answer right now until this whole thing happens. And hopefully they have gone through every single scenario as far as titles and people are concerned for the brand split, just so that, when it gets down to the nitty gritty, they have everything figured out and they're not like, scrambling to find out what to do here and what to do there. Because I feel like that's what happened with the last brand split, and it just ended up turning into mush. So, let's see. What else is there that happened on SmackDown? We have – I can't – as much as I like J. Cole, I can't play that while I'm talking because this is serious. So, as serious as WWE gets, not that serious, Miz TV had a segment with Darren Young. Darren Young just finished winning the Battle Royal on Raw. Now he's challenging The Miz for his Intercontinental Championship. And The Miz had a highlight reel of Darren Young's life coach, Bob Backlund, talking about how he was a great champion, a great role model way back in the day in the 80s and the 70s when he was champion. And then The Miz said, let me play Darren Young's highlight reel. And nothing came up. It was a blank screen. And he said, that's right. I couldn't find anything of you, Darren Young, as a joke, saying that he hasn't accomplished anything in WWE, which is almost true. He did win the tag titles, but as far as his singles career, he hasn't done much. And when The Miz put that up, obviously that was a funny thing. And we saw Darren Young laughing about it. Like he was laughing that The Miz was roasting him. You could see him chuckle after, The Miz puts the blank screen up. And it was a funny moment, it's funny, so it's understandable that he laughed. But what got me angry was that at the end of by the time the promo ended, right? Darren Young all of a sudden flipped the switch and he was pissed. And he was telling The Miz, oh yeah, we'll see if you want to fight me right now. Like, we'll see who's the champion. And the Miz is like, if you touch my mic one more time, he's like, touch it and then what? And he grabs his mic and says, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? And then he's all tough and mighty now. Like, this inconsistency as far as your character development is so crucial. When you're inconsistent as a character, how can the fans get behind you? How can they get behind you and support you 100% and you become over if you're not consistent with them? If you keep giving them bullshit and you go from one guy to another guy and you keep switching it up, you can't do that as a character on a show. When you keep switching it up like that, then people can never get behind you because they don't know who you are. They can't get behind something they don't know. You have, and it's all subconscious. It's all very small things, but these small things make a big deal in the end. You go back and, like I said, I bring up the 97 stuff because that's what I'm watching right now. You bring up Stone Cold from back when he was a heel and he was vicious. He was vicious every time he was on TV. He was vicious every single time, to the point where even Vince asked him, why do you have so much animosity? What's wrong with you? Why are you so angry all the time? And that's probably what people were thinking in their heads. Why is this guy so mad all the time? Every time he comes on TV, he's pissed off. That's because that was his character. He wasn't satisfied with where he was in the company, with what he was going through, so he was mad. And nothing was going to change that. But nowadays, you have guys like Roman who go from Samoan badass, again, like I brought up, to tater tots, to talking about someone's balls and calling them tater tots. And a guy like Darren Young, who is super serious at the end of a promo, at the end of a interview with the Miz, but at the beginning he's laughing when the Miz tells him that he has no career, that he had nothing, and he's laughing about it. You have to be one guy or the other. You can't be the jokester guy and laugh at your own expense, and then try to be the tough guy 10 seconds later, and vice versa. You can't be the tough guy and then all of a sudden try to act like a goofball. You have to be one or the other. You can't keep switching it up. Not in this world, not in WWE, because then the fans, again, they don't know who you are and they can't get behind you, and therefore you will never get over. Those little things you guys need to pay attention to. I don't know if I'm sure they teach it. I don't know if they do or not, but it's not like those guys are the only guys that do it. Matter of fact, almost the entire roster does it. Almost the entire roster does that. And this is one of the reasons why there aren't that many stars now, because nobody's consistent anymore. Everybody's always switching up their personality and their flow. The guys that I can say that are probably the most consistent are, John Cena, obviously, Seth Rollins to an extent. More now, Charlotte now than before, which is why I feel like Charlotte shouldn't lose the belt at SummerSlam, because I feel like she's just coming into her own so great now that it would just be a shame to see her lose the belt, even if it is to Sasha, because Sasha's going to have her time eventually. And Sasha's over whether she has the belt or not, kind of like the John Cena thing. But I think she's slowly losing her traction, and just giving her the belt while she's declining isn't a good idea. And Charlotte's only getting better and better. And you want the champion to be getting better and better and not getting worse over time. And obviously when Charlotte first won the belt, she wasn't the greatest, but she's gotten so much better. And it's just going to be weird to see her without the belt. Like, what is going to be her thing? Her whole thing is being the best and being the champion and the queen and the ruler of the women's division. But then when she loses the belt, how is she going to keep that gimmick? Because she's not going to be the best. So how is she going to go about that? And I don't know if she's good enough to come up with that kind of reaction herself. So I want to see Charlotte keep the championship, for the simple fact that I think it'll make some great TV for the next couple of weeks. And Charlotte is a great champion. Charlotte's probably, in my opinion, the best champion on WWE television. Yes, I'll definitely go with that. Rusev is great. The Miz is great. Ambrose is all right. NXT, Samoa Joe's all right. He just made his first appearance on NXT television after like 3 weeks, as being the champion. I I hate seeing things like that. Like Asuka. Asuka's gone. She's the NXT Women's Champion now, and she barely comes on TV. She went from being on TV every week to being the champion and barely showing up. So to me, it's just like, what was the point of you getting the belt if you're not even going to be on TV anymore? So I think Charlotte, she comes out week after week, kills it every week, and she might not be the best, but she does enough, and she does what she has to do to further the storyline. And I think people are very interested in the upcoming months as far as her and Sasha Banks goes, and even this tag match at Battleground, even that's going to be in some kind of must see match or whatever. So kudos to Charlotte. I don't think anybody else has ever said that on a podcast so far. I think I might be the first one, but it's true. Charlotte is the best champion in the company right now, and it'd be a shame to see her lose it at SummerSlam. I'd rather see other people lose it at SummerSlam than her, so we'll see where they go from there. NXT, not much to talk about there. There's only one match. It was between Finn Balor and Shinsuke Nakamura. Great match. No, I don't want to put it down or anything like that. It wasn't as good as Sami Zayn and Shinsuke earlier at NXT TakeOver Dallas earlier this year. But nonetheless, it was a great match. Shinsuke ends up going over at the end and getting the victory, which makes sense because I think Finn Balor is going to probably get called up during this draft that happens on Tuesday, and it's well-deserved. It's going to be another interesting dynamic to see what they do with him. And Shinsuke's on his way to being NXT champion. Now, again, Samoa Joe's a champion, and he's known for keeping belts for a long time. So, we'll see what they do with that. But NXT's always in a good place, so I'm never really worried about them too much, which is why I don't talk about them too much. Because when things are going well, you don't really bring up the good things. You kind of bring up the bad things, and you bring up the frustrations that you have. And NXT doesn't frustrate me. They just finished having a great 2 out of 3 falls match with American Alpha and the Revival. So, we'll see where they go from here. They just got to slowly start building up stars, and I think that Cruiserweight Classic that they're having is going to be a great way to do that. So they're all systems go. They know what they're doing. If there's one thing about Triple H, you can say whatever you want about his in-ring work, but as far as him being a good booker and building storylines over the course of NXT, he's been doing a pretty good job. So kudos to Triple H. Last segment of the show. We're starting to come to a close here, guys. Appreciate all you guys listening, all you guys sending me emails. Matter of fact, I'll read an email right now that someone sent me. This email is from he's from hometown in Boston, Massachusetts. Appreciate the love. Name's Jason. Jason asks, if you had to pick your top 5, top 5 guys from each company for the. Okay, so Jason basically wants Heartbreak to pick 5 guys, so 10 guys really, 5 from each side in the draft, and how I would draft them in what order. I think 10 is too much. I'll probably go top 3 for each side. Whoever the first pick is, I don't think the brands really matter. So the first pick to me would have to be John Cena. I think that's the biggest guy, so he'd have to be the first pick. The second pick, Roman Reigns. Third pick, I guess third pick would have to, or the second pick behind John Cena I would say Seth Rollins. The fourth pick would be Brock Lesnar, even though he doesn't come around a lot. But when he does come around, man, he's a big draw. So you can't leave him too far behind. Third pick, the final pick on the first side. So it was John Cena, Seth Rollins, and AJ Styles. And then on the other side, we had, who did we have? We had Brock Lesnar. What did I say first? Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns, and this last one can be Zack Ryder. I'm just kidding. Not Zack Ryder. I don't know. That's interesting. Charlotte, I guess. If we're not talking about NXT people, I would pick Charlotte because then you'd have the women's champion, and then you can build your whole women's division on that brand, which is important. So I'd pick that. So for the first side, I would have John Cena, Seth Rollins, and who's the third guy? AJ Styles would be the three headliners for one brand. Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar, and Charlotte would be the headliners for the other brand. And from there, you go for the mid card guys after that. But those six, I think, are the must see six. The six people that are the most important right now in the company. And that's what I think. I don't think it's funny because Dean Ambrose is the champion right now. You think the champion would be first, but that just goes to show you, in my opinion, how high I would have Dean Ambrose. I guess, and Kevin Owens too, but I still think Charlotte is more important than both of them because, like I said, Charlotte's been doing great these past couple of weeks. So, I don't really see. Charlotte, to me, she's more of she's a better champion than Dean. And her being champion already puts her over Kevin Owens, even though Kevin Owens is doing great stuff. I mean, I could even venture to put Kevin Owens over Dean Ambrose. I mean, Dean Ambrose has a very good following, but at the end of the day, I don't think Dean is the guy that if you want to make him the main event of SummerSlam is not going to do that well. I think if you put Charlotte at the main event of SummerSlam will do better. Then that's how you have to look at it. Those six people. If you had those six people as your main event of WrestleMania or SummerSlam, those six people will do very well, and everybody else will not do as well. If you put Kevin Owens in the main event without one of those six guys, it's not going to do that well. Same thing with Dean Ambrose. You put Dean Ambrose in the main event without one of those six people, it's not going to be that well. For them to have a great main event, for them to have a great main event that sells as well, they'd have to have one of those six people with them. I see I don't see Sasha Banks having a great main event without Charlotte. I see Charlotte having a great main event with anybody that deserves to be there. Becky Lynch, even a Natty, I can see them having a great match. I mean, it wouldn't be a great main event, but it'd be better than seeing Sasha and Natty. You know what I mean? Like, those are the six most polarizing people. AJ Styles, yes. Roman, yes. Brock, yes. Seth, yes. John Cena, yes. Charlotte, yes. You can't tell me any different. Those six people alone can give you better. Those six people, if those six guys had all the belts, WWE would be in a good place. Instead of having the Miz IC champion, one of them would be the United States champion, maybe Brock. I don't know, but those six people having those belts would definitely bring the company up higher. But obviously, a lot of those guys don't need belts to draw, so therefore they want to use the belts to bring up other people, which is understandable, which is the point. So, like I said, last segment I did want to talk about, that was just thank you, Jason, from the mailbag. If you guys have any other emails for me or questions or comments about the show, you can leave a comment, like, share, subscribe this. There's a live stream in some places, but this does stick on YouTube. I know that for sure. So like it if you want, subscribe to the page. We'd love to. I do these every week. So, and I do them pretty good, I'd like to think. Heartbreak does a pretty good job. And I was also gonna say, I was gonna bring up my Heartbreak Time Machine segment and talk about 1997, but I talked about it enough. I feel like so I'll go into that more on another show. I'll probably just do that as a separate thing itself and just talk about how the uprising at that time. But I did want to bring up something a little bit more serious. Um, I really don't like talking about things like, things that happen in the real world. That's why I kind of, when it comes to like WWE, it's kind of my escape from a lot of the bad things that go on in the real world. But at the same time, you can't turn a blind eye to those things because then you become ignorant to them. And I never found myself as an ignorant person. Heartbreak never seemed to be very ignorant. So, you have to be educated in this world and you have to educate yourself with what's going on and be aware of what's going on in the world around you. And, obviously things like, shootings that happen to people that, you know, to African Americans and the Black Lives Matter movement. And, one thing about that, I always hear, Black Lives Matter, yes, but, it's like almost racist to say that, because in reality, all lives matter. I mean, yes, obviously all lives matter, but you know, it's like going to the doctor and saying, yeah, I have a broken arm. And your doctor goes, well, all the bones in your body are important. And it's like, yeah, dude, like, I'm not stupid. Like, duh, all the bones in my body are important. But like, can we fix this problem first before you say something dumb like that? Can we fix my broken arm? Like, that's how you have to look at it, really. You know, a broken arm. And when it comes to those kind of things, I feel like people just have to educate themselves and be more aware of what's going on and really have a voice and be a part of the cause and the movement if that's your belief. Be a part of it and help facilitate change because I don't care what stance you have on this whole thing, seeing innocent people dying and getting killed, and there was a tragedy very recently also in France, um, that in Nice, France. It's spelled Nice. I don't know if it's Nice or Nice. If my French is correct, which isn't very good. I would assume it's Nice, but there was a big tragedy during a parade over there recently, and when things like that happen, people just need to rally together and to help change and to help facilitate a difference and make a difference so that things like that don't happen ever again or happen very, very, very seldomly. So I think we're in a very weird time now in the world where we have to all realize that we have to band together and not turn against each other and blame others for what's going on. But hate, doesn't solve anything. And fear is a very strong motivator for some people. So fear of losing their lives or having things like that happen to their loved ones, people will do radical things. So for me, definitely the number one cause or the number one thing that I feel like will help everyone get out of this is love and to take that emotion and to spread that and spread love. That's how I feel. So that's it for the Heartbreak Heel Turn. Again, I thank you guys a lot, so much for listening. I really do appreciate it. I think I'm starting to get the hang of the show a little bit more. Um, like I said, live TV isn't always the best. This isn't always perfect, but you make do with what you have, and you try to do the best you can. And as I'm saying this, I just realized that my laptop is at 1%, so it's kind of perfect timing that I'm ending this the way I'm ending it. Positive vibes only. That's how I live my life. I feel like that's how everybody else should. I don't care if you think I'm wrong. It is what it is. This is Dr. Heartbreak again. All you guys have a great weekend. It's nice outside. Go to the beach. Go enjoy life. And watch wrestling as much as you can. It's great. I didn't get to talk about Brother Nero either, but again, I'll do that. I promise you guys I'll do another one of these this weekend before Raw, Saturday or Sunday. So I appreciate you guys again, and stay classy.
Perfect.